Um, Welcome. So glad that you're all here. And what I'd like to do is to let you know that the reason it's a special meeting is because we have more than 2 board members here. So we will not be discussing board stuff that is not on the agenda. It is 10:02. Would you please join me in the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sure. My name is David Hirsch. I'm going to be presenting this Brown Act training today. I'm with Carmel and Natasha, which is the firm that represents the district as district counsel. Tim Carmel, of course, is district counsel, and I'm assistant district counsel. I've been doing stuff with Cambria since 2000. Yes, you're going to have to speak. And my voice doesn't carry that well. I realize that. So I apologize for that. I can't help my being soft-spoken, but I am. I'll keep that in mind though, and try to speak as loudly as I can. In any case, I've been doing work with Carmel and Natasha and with Cambria since March of 2009. So 16 years. Before that, I was an in-house municipal attorney for 31 years. I was a deputy and assistant city attorney in Cedar Valley. I then became city attorney in Lompoc, where I served as city attorney for 17 years. Then I went back to Cedar Valley as city attorney for 10 years and some change, almost 11 years. So I've been doing this. In any case, you do need to have one housekeeping thing taken care of legally under the Brown Act. And that is, since these are special meetings for the standing committees and for the board of directors, we have to allow for public comment.
And because this is a special meeting, the public comment will be only on the agenda item, and this is agenda item under regular business. And basically, it's a presentation on the Brown Act. So I'd like to call for any public comment at this time. Nobody in-house? Anybody online? No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We crossed that T and dotted that I. And like I said, my voice doesn't carry that well. I've also noticed my allergies are worse in Cambria than they are at home in Arroyo Grande for some reason. So when I was here last week for the strategic plan update meetings, I noticed that he's having a little bit more trouble. So hopefully that won't have too much of an effect on my making my presentation. I tend to be tied to my notes. So if you see me looking down or reading too much, that's why. It's just the way I'm programmed when it comes to making a presentation such as this. We have the PowerPoint, just as a disclaimer, I have no idea where this PowerPoint came from initially. It was something that they had at the office, and I've updated it a couple of times. Last year, I added a couple of slides because of changes to the law. I made a couple of minor changes this year. They weren't last time, rather. I've done this presentation several times here, 2019, 2021 by Zoom, 2023, and now again. Just a quick opening story. When I first sat with the city council in 1979 as a young deputy city attorney, the police chief came up to me before the meeting and said, "Look, I know you're nervous, and I just want you to remember there are 3 things that should cover about 90% of the issues that are going to come up at the meeting that you may have to respond to. One is conflict of interest, one is gift of public funds, and the other is Brown Act violation." So that always kind of stuck with me as words of wisdom from a wise old police chief. In any case, slide number 1 is just Carmel and Natasha, so let's go to slide 2. And The Brown Act is the open meeting law that applies to public agencies in California. As you can see, it was authored by Ralph M. Brown, an assembly representative from Turlock, California in the fifties. It now is contained in Government Code Section 54950 to 54963. The purpose of the Brown Act is clearly stated in Government Code Section 54950, with legislative purpose. And that section has not changed since 1953. And just to read a quote, this is not in the slides. The public commissions, boards, and councils, and the other public agencies in the state exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted publicly. So it's the people's business that we're talking about. Principles behind the Brown Act, the open meeting laws, and also the Public Records Act, were enshrined in the state constitution in 2004. The term constitutionalized, I don't know if that's real or not, but back then we talked about that. And it's now in Section 3 of Article 1 of the California Constitution. And the constitutional provision states that people have the right of access to information concerning the conduct of the people's business, and therefore the meetings of public bodies and the writings of public officials and agencies shall be open to public scrutiny. So the basic premise is that the public has a right to know how their business is being conducted. Slide 3. As a practical matter, I keep up with the slides because I can't see them from here. As a practical matter, the Brown Act can be very frustrating to public officials. Why? Because at least it limits a majority from discussing agency business together. So if you have a 5-person body, 2 can talk to each other, but 3 can't about the same topic. I remember years ago, and by the way, I have stories that I peppered my presentation with. They're the same stories that I told in 2023 and 2021. So if you're at those presentations, sorry, this is what I have. But years ago, I attended a city attorney's program, and the guest speaker was Jerry Brown. And at that time, he was between stints as governor. He was the mayor of Oakland. And after he spoke, he was the keynote speaker. There was a break, and several of us were standing around talking to Jerry Brown. And he was grumbling about the Brown Act and how it was inhibiting his ability to do business. That he couldn't, start to line up votes with his council members. And by gosh, when he was governor, he didn't have that problem. He could go talk to legislators, and it didn't have that kind of restriction. And we all kind of looked at each other, city attorneys, going, welcome to our world. But it can be frustrating, but the purpose is to ensure that deliberations and actions, with limited exceptions, closed sessions, are open to the public, and the public has a right to participate and have access to the decision-making process. Again, more legislative intent from that same statute, 54950, is in the slide. The people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so they may retain control over the instruments they have created. Again, Government Code Section 54950. So who is subject to the Brown Act? Obviously, the governing body, the board of directors, in the case of the district, the city council, the board of supervisors for the county. Also, committees, commissions created by formal action. So here we call them standing committees, which is a bit of a misnomer, but they're formally created committees. And the reason I said a bit of a misnomer it is because the Brown Act also applies to standing committees of the body, of the legislative body, and I should mention, you're all members of legislative bodies if you're on the board of directors, or if you're on the committees, you know, the Finance Committee, new Fire Protection Committee, R&I, and so on, pros. You're, for Brown Act purposes, you're members of a legislative body when it comes to interpreting the statutes that apply. So standing committees of the legislative body that have continuing subject matter jurisdiction are subject to the Brown Act. There is an exception for what are typically referred to as ad hoc committees. Those are committees that have a limited purpose and subject matter that they're formed to be responsible for, and typically go out of existence once they achieve the task that they've been charged with. And they have to consist solely of less than a quorum of the legislative body. So you can't have other folks that are part of an ad hoc committee, but it can only be less than a quorum of the legislative body. So where are we? Let's go to slide 6. Critical part of the Brown Act. What does it mean? This gets kind of interesting, and I'll talk a lot about how some of this evolved. But Government Code Section 54952.2 lays out a meeting as being defined as any congregation of a majority of the members of a legislative body at the same time and location, including teleconference locations, and we'll talk about teleconferences too, to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. So to hear, discuss, it's not just taking action that constitutes a meeting. It's the acquisition of information that can constitute a meeting. Also, importantly, subsection B of 54952.2, it was just added a number of years ago, and we'll talk about how that got added, prohibits a majority outside of an authorized meeting from using a series of communications of any kind, directly or through intermediaries, to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item of business within the agency's subject matter jurisdiction. Action taken is also broadly defined in the statutes. A collective decision by a majority, collective commitment or promise, actual vote. Some of the case law and AG opinions talk about collective concurrence. So again, it's something to keep in mind. There are exceptions. Slide 7. Individual contacts between an agency member, a board member rather, a legislative body member, and another person. But remember, you can't use another person to be an intermediary to discuss, deliberate, or take action. So you have to be conscious of that. A majority of members can also attend conferences that are open to the public, and open and publicized community meetings organized by another organization, like a Chamber of Commerce, attending open meetings of another body, like the Board of Supervisors, social and ceremonial events. There's an interesting new Attorney General's opinion, and really fairly limited changes, by the way, since my 2023 presentation. So my changes are on sticky notes. And so hopefully it won't interrupt the flow too much, and I'll remember to read them. But there was an interesting Attorney General's opinion that came out last year, 2024, that caused quite a stir, at least among city attorneys. I noticed on the city attorney listserv on the League of Cities, where a state of the city address by a mayor, which are done quite commonly, that was being held and sponsored by a Chamber of Commerce, where the public could attend, but they had to pay to attend. the Attorney General concluded that was not within the exception that relates to meetings organized by another entity that are open to the public, because it wasn't open to the public except you had to pay. It was interesting because they also analyzed other exemptions such as conferences or ceremonial and social exceptions, and found none of those applied. And so a majority of the city council was not able to attend that state of the city presentation. When it comes to these exceptions, there's still caveats. The statute talks about a majority may not discuss among themselves business within the subject matter of their jurisdiction. So if 3 board members attended a board of supervisors meeting, they couldn't sit there and talk about district business. One warning is to not sit together, and a lot of that relates to appearances. When I was a young deputy city attorney, I sat with the planning commission in Cedar Valley. And I had the city attorney come up to me one day and said, we've been getting reports that 3 of the planning commissioners after the meetings are going out and having a drink together at a local bar. And the rumor is they're talking business. And so I want you to talk to those planning commissioners and find out what's going on and caution them, which I did. And of course, they were pissed off. They said, hey, we're just talking sports. We're just talking, we're not talking about planning commission business, but a lot of it becomes appearances. And so I was showing this to Haley earlier. This is a picture from the newspaper, from the Lompoc Record from March 14th, 1991. Still have it. I received this in the mail. At the top, written in red, anonymously, it said, isn't this a Brown Act violation? Please look into this. And the picture consists of 3 city council members attending a press conference at which someone, Tim Staffel, is announcing he was going to run for Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors. And no, that was not a Brown Act violation. But again, it's appearances. Tim did win. He became a county supervisor. He was subsequently a judge in Santa Barbara County until a few years ago. He's retired now, from what I understand. But again, a lot of it relates to appearances. Another exception, and this is an important one, and we'll talk about how we got to it, are staff briefings, separate conversations by staff to answer questions, provide information. But at the same time, staff may not communicate to members of the legislative body the comments or positions of any other member of the legislative body. So it's quite common for that to occur now, and it's in the statutes. But how did we get there? It's kind of an interesting story. At least it is for me, since I lived through it. There were older attorney general opinions that talked about what were called seriatim meetings. And they basically arose from questions of whether a city manager could brief city council members 2 at a time, never having a majority in the room, about agenda items and things on the agenda. The attorney general said, no, that would be a seriatim meeting. That would be a violation of the Brown Act. Subsequently, there was a case out of the city of Stockton where it's kind of a similar issue. A city official made individual calls to city council members and got them to agree on something 1 at a time. Court said that was a Brown Act violation. The city official, who happened to be the city attorney, Jerry Sperry, was acting as an agent of the city and violated the law by getting a collective concurrence, there's that term, as to action to be taken. I had a city manager once. I went into his office and he had a little sheet there. He showed it to me, and it was something he was going to circulate among the city council as to whether he could or should or shouldn't do something. He created a little box with their initials, yes or no, on top. And I said, good job. You're going to document a Brown Act violation. You can't do that. So in 2006, there was a case, Wolf versus Fremont, that set off quite a stir in the state. They basically found that a city manager's individual meetings with council members to discuss a new policy that was later the subject of a council meeting did not violate the Brown Act. In what it called the implied prohibition of serial meetings. Implied, it was not in the statutes at that point. And that it was only a violation if the city manager acts as a personal intermediary between legislative body members, and it's used to develop collective concurrence. Well, that really set off quite a firestorm. Suddenly, informational briefings were okay. And I used to caution the city manager in Simi Valley, which is where I was at the time, because he used to have these informational meetings all the time. And I would warn him, he can't do that, you have to be careful. So I told him about this Wolf case, and he looked at me and said, see, I told you so. At the same time, around that time, in Orange County, the district attorney had issued a memo to local agencies saying that those kind of briefings were a Brown Act violation. Now you had an appellate decision that settled the issue and again, created quite a stir, especially among the media, which tend to be the watchdog of the Brown Act. Finally, in 2008, a bill was signed by the governor, which was intended to supersede this Wolf versus Fremont case. And it codified the prohibition on the use of serial meetings at 54952.2 B1 that we talked about, which prohibits a majority of the members of the legislative body
David, you're good to go.
Slide 8 talks about, or often referred to as daisy chain and hub and spoke serial meetings. Daisy chain is where one member of the legislative body talks to B, B talks to C, C talks to another one, and now you have a meeting. Hub and spoke is where one member of the body contacts individually two others, you have 3 total, you have a serial meeting. So again, you have to be careful about these things. A couple of slides I added in 2023 relating to AB 992, social media. The Brown Act caught up with some of the technology a little bit and added a couple of provisions to the Brown Act. 54952B3 now provides, this was effective in January of 2021, it's AB 992. that the provisions of the Brown Act do not, let's see. That prohibits the majority of the members from using series of communications directly or through intermediaries
David?
outside of an authorized meeting.
David,
Yes.
can I just stop you 1 sec? I'm getting multiple texts that the meeting's stopped, so can you just hold on 1 sec?
Everyone's letting you know it went out.
Yeah, just hold on 1 sec. It's also not letting me share the screen out there, so let me get back on. Matthew, can you hear us?
Yep. You guys are good.
Yeah, I can't hear anyone, so I'm gonna actually stop the recording and restart because we're having technical difficulties.
Sorry.